Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'll probably like dance around because I can't help it. So I'm on the faculty in the theater arts program, and I would like to sort of preface the talk with something of like an open invitation, because what I'll show was developed down the street at 345 Vassar in a building known as W97, and happy to give a tour or a demo of some of the things that we're up to down there. Just right, I'm easy to find. So today, what I'm going to talk about, is an opera written by Richard Wagner, end of the 19th century, premiering in the 1880s in Bayreuth, and the opera is Parsifal. In 2017, so some years before the pandemic, I received a mysterious message from Bayreuth, from the great-granddaughter of Richard Wagner, Katharina Wagner, to ask if I would come for a meeting that was scheduled for 5 hours. She'll meet with you from 12 till 5. I thought, okay, cool. And because things like that are so unusual, I said yes. I showed up at the meeting, and the first thing that she asked was whether or not I thought it would be possible to integrate VR or AR into a live performance of an opera. And I said yes, because I always say yes, not actually having any idea how we would pull it off. And then the pandemic happened, and things got strange. But I began working on it immediately, and conducted a number of seminars with our students, actually, at MIT, to sort of help tease out some of the concepts. One of the remarkable things, this is a photo of the Opera House as it appears today, and more or less as it has appeared for many, many decades. When it was built, toward the end of the 19th century, there were a number of very unique architectural innovations. The most important of which is this strange orchestra shell, right? So prior to Wagner, for the most part, there were no orchestra pits, right? You would always see the orchestra and the singers behind them. And in this case, Wagner and Otto Bruchwald, the architect that he collaborated with, they sought to make a more immersive environment. They wanted us to not have to see what he then referred to as the machine of the music. We call them musicians. So they created this idea of an orchestra pit that would completely cover the conductor, right? So if we go to the Met and see an opera, usually we can see the conductor, but worse, we see a lot of light, right? And so in the case of this unique innovation, they actually cover the orchestra and shield us from the light. In addition to the orchestra pit, there's a series of proscenium arches. So the proscenium being the frame that goes around a stage. And in Bayreuth, there are 2, so it's doubled. And that also has the ability to help shield the light. But then, as another kind of unique element, they added one proscenium after another receding into the audience. And the effect was to make the audience feel like they're actually closer to the action, with the hope that you would sort of really just kind of get into the story, right? And so we took the step of coming up with a way to also essentially make the theater disappear, which Wagner wrote about. He was like, well, first we'll make the machine of the music disappear, and then actually the theater itself. What he meant was that they would dim the lights, right? Which they did. It was known as the darkest theater in the world. We decided to put people in headsets. And so one of the first things we did was back in 2017 and 18, when it was still somewhat fresh, we rolled in and made a LiDAR scan of the entire theater. And then, of course, slowly but surely the pandemic came, and I spent most of the pandemic teaching myself how to deal with millions of points in space, literally. And eventually we ended up with a digital twin of the theater. And what this digital twin makes possible is for us to know within a millimeter of where every seat in the house is, every architectural element, every possible nook and cranny, actually. Whoa. And in fact, if we were to put this into a VR headset, you could walk around on a football field and actually walk through the entire theater, right? So it's a one-to-one scale model in virtual space. We then partnered with a company in China called XReal, and we worked with these XReal headsets, in part because they don't actually mess up your hair. So I know this may sound strange, but part of the design brief was also that people do spend a great deal of time working on their hair before showing up at the premiere of an opera. And it needs to be comfortable. And so we found these, which sort of make folks look a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, and folks wore them. So, Parsifal, because an opera does have to be about something. And Parsifal is about, basically it's about a guy who did bad things and then was wounded. And the wound will never heal, right? If some of us might know the story of the Fisher King. And so for us, we focused on a number of wounds. And coming out of the pandemic, the United States in any case, and really most of the world, faced a lot of problems, faced a lot of wounds that have even today still never healed, right? And so we found this as our motto, a hole bigger than the hole the thing is in. And we allowed that to sort of guide our process, which brought us into a world of cobalt, into a world of extraction, right? The extraction both of human resources as well as natural resources. And that became kind of the underlying theme. A horse, of course, a horse, and flying objects. But effectively, the AR allowed us to put extra layers of content into the space. And so we create a kind of simultaneous parallel flow of content. In this case, the riderless horse gallops through the auditorium. And for folks who are sitting house right, the feet come down next to you. No matter where you are sitting in the auditorium, you have a different perspective on the objects, right? Just a bit about process. We storyboarded the entire thing. This is one of my drawings. I take credit for this. But as an example, we would storyboard these ideas, arrows flying out into the auditorium, Parsifal famously shoots the swan. And we thought, well, the swan should also bleed. It's talked about in the opera. And then this is what you would see if you were sitting in the back row. And the swan flies by, arrows are whizzing past your head, literally. And the swan eventually gets hit. And as advertised, bleeds. But meanwhile, there's also a swan on the floor, or on stage, which they're tending to. And so we see in the back via live video them tending to a wound while also witnessing a swan which is over and over being shot by an arrow again and again and again. On stage. Again, the tools of extraction in a mining machine. And for us, the Grail Hall rose out of the water. So we had this giant light ring that came up out of the water in order to reveal the Grail Hall. Here it is with the AR content, a fox running around in plastic bags, because in the end, the plastic bags will still be here, and a giant skull. For those of us who know the opera, in the second act, we go to Klingsor's magic castle, where all sorts of, where basically he has captured a number of people who are a number of women who are referred to as the flower maidens. And so we put them in the air, flower maidens and flower men in our case. The actors on stage, and the objects in the house. So from this angle, if you were to look up, they're above you, they're behind you, they're in front of you. It's sort of like, basically the content takes over the entire auditorium. I don't have good images of the actual performance, I just have those few rehearsal shots. And then this we shot with a phone, because we're developing a phone application. Although we've not yet sort of released it, because we haven't yet been able to imagine an entire audience in an opera house with their phones out. Yet. I'm interested in it, but there's some resistance. And then I'll just show a little bit of this video. Give you a... So one of the things that I would point out is that we created a WebSocket system so that the control of the objects would reside online, and then loaded locally all of the headsets with the content, which boils down to around 450 cues. And so then a stage manager watching the conductor and with a score is listening to the music, watching the conductor, and hitting a go button, right? Which then sent a signal to each of the headsets. Right? So each headset, we got it down to something like a 0.1 or 0.3, 0.1 to 0.3 millimeter lag, but effectively managed to make all of the headsets in the auditorium operate simultaneously, which was a huge feat for us, and something that we actually spent the better part of 2 years figuring out how to do. In terms of like a kind of quality of the images, they're somewhere between realistic and cartoons, right? Because basically we hit the upper limit of the processing power of the device really quite quickly, right? It's basically run on an Android device, so we expect in the world of augmented reality for that to change rapidly. As some of you may have seen the new Apple headset. The quality in the Apple headset is extraordinary, but it's also a very different technology, and it will definitely mess up your hair. It has to be said. But in Bayreuth, it's also such that not everyone wanted to wear them, and of course, many did, and so they're not available for the entire auditorium, also due to cost. And so we had to make 2 operas, one for an audience in headsets and one for an audience who was just attending a production of Parsifal in Bayreuth, the Church of Bridget Wagner. There it is. So anyway, augmented reality. For us, the idea to use it or not use it was never actually a question. We sort of like leapt into the project, as I have leapt into many of these kinds of projects in the past, simply because it seems like it's important for us to get our arms around new technologies and make them expressive. Maybe before they express us, I don't know. But generally speaking, that's a big part of what we do in the theater arts program. While we do have instruction in all of the sort of traditional forms, theater, dance, design, we're also pushing the edges of as many technologies as are coming around and trying to stay abreast of those changes, or in some cases, as with this, a bit ahead of it. And that's what I got. Please go in.